This episode sponsored by Lake Monster Details, producing the Don's Light and Magic Legacy line of parts, offering upgrade parts and decals for accuracy, special effects, and lighting. Visit www.lakemonsterdetails.com and make it glow. Also sponsored by GCals, producing aftermarket replacement decals and custom quality graphics for your favorite spaceships. Visit www.gcals.company.site and add some personalization to your sci-fi models today. Also sponsored by Mask Design, boldly going where no masking kit has gone before. Take your model to the next level of detail and accuracy with a masking kit from Mask Design. Visit Mask Design on Facebook or click the ordering link in the notes below the video.
Hey, what's up, fellow modelers? Will here. Welcome to the Ensign's Chair and the second episode, I think. The second episode of the Kronos one. I've got some modifications we're going to talk about. I'm going to show you where we've been at, but this is where we're at right now. And you can see that front. I'll show you how I did that, and I will also show you how I achieved that the impulse deck on the back here and got that done. This part is together. It's ready for painting, and I can't wait to get those masks in and start working on that. They're going to look great. But anyway, without further ado, give me a minute. I'll put you on the bench. We'll get to work. All right, guys, so just going back a minute and talking about this front plate that we got to do all these modifications on. So I don't take this as bashing Polar Lights Round 2 in any way. I'm just a little bit disappointed, though. You know, they put a good amount of work into this model, creating new pieces and molding new stuff and things like that. But the amount of modifications you have to do on this it's just ridiculous for a model right out of the box. And I'm saying this coming from a viewpoint of, you know, people in the modeling, well, Star Trek modeling community in general or specific, has been begging for a 1-350 Reliant for years, and the response we've always gotten is, well, they don't want to do it because they don't have good information on a certain section of the Reliant. They want to see the studio model, blah blah blah, and it's like, okay, well, so you want to make sure it's the most accurate model you can. But then we get this, where it's obviously it's just a cost-cutting measure, you know, to not change this faceplate. If the other little details, the parts on the underside where you've got to fill in those two holes, the two slots on top, that's no big deal. But this is a major rework of the front. And to be honest with you, I've been working on it, and I'm just not happy with the way it's turning out. Some of these windows are in between the panels, so when you fill them in and then when you sand them, you lose some of the definition of the panels. At least I have. Some people may have figured out a way to do it without that, but excuse me. But I noticed that some of the panels are becoming rounded at the edges. They just weren't as crisp as I would like them to be. But I came up with a solution. Let me move this out the way. And I got my morning cup of coffee here. But so this is what I did. Let me prop this up a second. This is, let me bring this down a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. And focus. Oh, too far. All right. So you see what I did on the front here is I basically made a set of veneer panels to replace the panels that were losing definition. And what this let me do is basically not worry about these panels, completely sand them off, Kind of like the details on the 1350 nacelles when you have to sand that seam line on the underside, and you've got those the paneling there that it's really hard to sand that and not lose some of the definition on. It's just easier to sand those off and come back over it with some plastic and redo those panels. Same idea here, but I went in and designed some panels in 3D, and I based these panel lines, which I don't know if you can see them with the lighting, if the camera's picking them up or not. I know you can see this one here pretty good. These ones turn out pretty good. This one's a little harder to see because the way the lighting's sitting on it and the angle it's at. But I did the panel lines based on what I saw in the pictures of the studio model, and did these up, test fitted them, went back, resized them some if I needed to, redid some parts, and this is what I came up with. So I've got 1, 2, and 3 sets on this side, 1, 2, 3 on this side that I redid, plus the vents, which I realized what they did with the studio model to cover those holes that are in the model that you get. They put a panel over one hole, so I recreated that panel as best I could on this side, although it's at this scale it's pretty small. But they did that, and then they ran hoses through the holes on both sides that existed to make those look like they were a purpose for those holes instead of filling them in. So that's what they did on the studio model, but for this model they want you to fill those holes in. I just found it easier. I filled them in, I sanded them, I tried re-etching the lines or re-scribing the lines. They didn't look as good to me as I would like. So because they're really fine lines, they're really difficult to redo versus a larger panel line. So what I did is I went in, remade these, sized these to the original shape of the vents that were on there, sanded everything off, the panels on this side, and the vents. Sanded everything down, and I've fixed these panels in place now. Plus, you see I get that added detail here of that box that they put on the front, that panel they put on there to help cover the holes on the vents on the studio model. Plus, I get the added benefit of these. These are supposed to stick out further than what they show on the studio model. They should be almost even with these lines over here, maybe a little bit more than these lines. So I'm going to see when I stick that top part on here and see how these line up. These should actually stick out. These vents should stick out from that panel on top. These should stick out from it instead of being tucked under it. So we'll see how that looks when I get to it, if I have to do some additional sanding, which I left a little bit of material on top here to sand this to the contour because there's a curve on the top of this. To sand these to that contour, but I want to wait until I get that panel on top, see how these are looking. But I like these a lot better than what I was getting with just sanding these and then losing. There's no detail on these once you fill in the windows. The panel lines just add a little bit of scale and character to me. So that's what I did. That's what my solution for it is. If anybody's interested in these, I don't have time to, I was going to try to offer these myself, but I just don't have time to. I've got the model building going on. I've got projects at home I need to do, and then I've got the bomber jacket belt buckle, which I am looking to start producing and selling here shortly, and that's just taking up too much of my time. So what I did was I sent these files over to Cass at Lake Monster Details, and he is going to work these up in cast resin versus a 3D printed resin, and he should have those available on his website here, hopefully not too long. He said he was going to make them a priority since this model just came out, and I think this is kind of an area that people may run into issues with, especially if they don't have a lot of modeling experience. And even if you do, it's difficult sometimes to do certain things. But just to say one thing, if you're doing this and you're having issues with making, like this area here was really a pain in my butt to get this to sand decent and get it to look smooth. But let me just show you something for those of you that are having a hard time. All right, so what I wanted to show you was this is the studio model, and I don't know how well it's going to show up for you, but you could tell that you could see where they filled it in on the studio model. They filled it in there,
And I don't know if you can tell in this photo, but there's photos where you can tell where they filled the windows in. And so, you know, it's don't fret too much about it if you can't make it look perfect, because the studio model itself wasn't perfect. You could tell where they did the fill-ins and that. You just couldn't tell from a distance when they were filming, you know, and lighting it for the movie that you know, that was less than perfect. But you see all these other panel lines on here too. I'm willing to bet money that these are probably scribed. It was probably drawn on. I mean, not scribed into the plastic. It looks like these are just like penciled on, or I don't even think these were painted. It looks more like these were drawn on here to me. Some of these panel lines. Because some of these you can tell probably from the Katinga, but then there's other ones that look like they're scribed with a pencil or something on the front of this. They don't look etched into the plastic. So I think once I get this together and done, I may look to recreate these panel lines using pencil or something along those lines, because you see how it's disappearing here in some areas. I think those were drawn on. But anyway, just wanted to show you guys that maybe are stressing over, oh, it's got to look perfect. You know what? The studio model didn't look perfect, so don't beat yourself up over it. It took me a bit of sanding and filling and priming and sanding and repeating to finally get this looking decent. For some reason, this just doesn't like to come up smooth. But at any point, ready to move on, and let's talk about doing some lighting. All right, so got another correction to make to a part. So I was looking at the impulse deck on the back here, the impulse engines, and I was just looking at the photo of the studio model to figure out what color I want to paint these. And I think I'm going to go with the pewter color. It's a little bit darker than a gunmetal. So I'm going to use that color. But I was noticing that this center part that I was all worried about breaking when I was cutting out the supports is incorrect. It's these aren't right for the Kronos 1. So if you look at the studio model, I'll bring up a picture. You can see on the back there that those impulse engines, it's just one single cross member, kind of at an angle there. That's coming across the back of those, so it's not this this part that it's showing on the model is not correct to the Kronos 1. It might be correct to the Katinga, but it's not correct to this. And it's just, the funny thing is they made this part bigger, but they didn't change it. They didn't accurize it any. They just basically took the Katinga part and just made it larger. So what I did was I went in and again I made a corrective part. So you can see here, let me focus this a little bit. You can see here I've made that to be pretty accurate to what the studio model has. And I'll show you that picture again of the studio model so you can see. You see how this cross member is with the raised edges on the each side. And it pretty much goes from this corner here. And then again you can see on the studio model that's exactly how it should be. So I have corrected that, and again that's another part that I will send over to Cass to include in that that bundle. What's apparently going to end up being a bundle of accurizing parts to add to this. So, but there's your look at the difference. This one here is the kit part, which may be accurate for the Katinga, but it's not accurate for the Kronos 1, which should just be a single bar across it. So I'm gonna get this painted up and get those lenses in place, and then I'm still waiting on the masking set from Gary over at Mask Design. Mine's showing is coming on Thursday. So once that gets here, I can. It'll come with masks to cover this so that when I go to paint it, I won't have to worry about any of this getting messed up. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this painted, get the lenses in, and then that way it's good, it's ready to go.
if I got to do any seam work, which I don't think I'll have to. There may be a seam around there, but I don't think it's going to be a major one. And if you did do anything to it, there's ridges on this piece here that you're going to lose trying to do any seam work here. So I'm going to try to get away with not messing with that. But I'm going to get this finished. I'm going to get this other one modified. Basically, to modify this, all you do is just very carefully cut this across the top of the bottom, using a sharp blade on your hobby knife or using a micro saw, and just cut this off. And then I used a flat file, and I just smoothed it out to get it where I needed it. And then I just took this part and glued it in place and did a primer coat on it, and actually didn't really have to do any putty work to it. It just kind of fits into place there. So I'm gonna get this finished up, and we'll come back and take a look at it. All right, guys, so I've got this impulse deck done. Now let me say, before I get into talking about or showing this impulse deck, let me say I have to admit I was wrong. So that cross member I was talking about, that is not how the Kronos 1 appeared, not how the impulse engines appeared in Star Trek 6. They appeared in Star Trek 6 just as they do on the kit model, and as they did in the motion picture for the Katinga. So it kind of threw me off a bit, because I'm looking at this picture of the studio model that was taken. I think this was taken before it was auctioned off in 2006, and there were several different people took photos. There was pictures taken when it just came out the crate, pictures taken out in the parking lot in natural daylight, and there was just there were several different times that these pictures were taken, but I think these were all taken before it was put up for auction. So after I had mentioned that this is how, the single cross member was how the Kronos 1 was, I have pictures of the model that I took when I saw it at the Skirball in 2021. Let me pull up the one. And I happened to know this when I was looking at the pictures. I happened to notice this picture. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. This is how it looks right now, because this is how it looked at the Skirball in 2021 when I took a picture of it and it was on display. So when did this single cross member thing come up? And the only thing I could find, I tried reading about it and read about the original Katinga model, and I didn't find anything written about that physical change in particular to the Kronos 1. I know they had to do a lot of work on the Kronos 1, because when they uncrated it, it was like somebody had tried to paint over it with a white, and it was the paint job was just totally trashed. So they redid the unique paint job you see for the Kronos 1 as a result of, they had to repaint it anyway, so they wanted to do something original, and then all the adornments they came up with as well as a result of that. But the only time that you do see the single cross member is in the Star Trek episode Voyager, the episode Flashback. Now they did rebuild, Greg Jean built a whole new Excelsior for that episode, so it wouldn't surprise me if they made that modification for that episode as well. I don't know why they would bother with it. It's such a minute detail, but that's the only time that you see that, and that's the last time that model, the physical studio model, was used on screen, was in the Voyager Flashback episode for season 3. That's the last time the physical model was used. Everything after that was CGI. And as far as the Next Generation episodes, that was those were all stock footage shot of the Katinga in the motion picture. So this model was, the studio model was used again in The Way of the Warrior, I think, in DS9, and then again the last time it was used was in the episode Flashback for Voyager. And like I said, you don't see the engines. I tried looking through screen caps for The Way of the Warrior, but you do see them in the Flashback episode, and you can tell. Here's the picture of it. But you can tell there that it's the single cross member in that picture. So apparently it was changed around that time for this episode. And the only thing I could figure is that when the model was purchased, they had that rear end redone, because, I'll pull it up again, when you look at this, that rear photon launcher has like a medallion or something inside of it there, which I don't think was part of the original miniature. And apparently they had the impulse engines returned to the original appearance, because it doesn't appear that has that honeycomb or that textured impulse screen there, so it looks smooth. So I'm guessing that they had that redone at some point. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that I was wrong. This is the way that this model comes with those impulse engines, even though everything else that's wrong with them, that is actually correct. But I have already made the modification, and I'm cool with that because I think it looks pretty awesome. Still, even with that change, and even though it's not accurate to the Kronos 1, it's okay. I'm happy with it. I'm gonna leave it. It'll just be a unique part of my model, and we'll call it the flashback Kronos. But I've got this just sitting in place right now. I'm getting ready to seal up the hull, and let me turn this on so you can see how this turned out. And turn this light out, and there you go. I like the light diffusion on that. I think that turned out really nice. I did it exactly the way I said I was going to do it. I put that red lens that came with it that was too small. I put that inset on this piece, and then I installed the larger lens to the actual cover here that goes in place, that you glue in place. I haven't glued this in yet. I've just got it kind of sitting in place right now. But I think that diffusion turned out really nice that way. It looks really good. I like it. And that photon launcher, you can see it's lighting up really nice. It's too bad that the stock kit that comes from Polar Lights is steady on. They don't give you a button to, at least, even if it didn't have sound effects. And even if it was just a switch where you turned it on and off, would have been cool. But it's okay. Like I said, this won't be the only one that I do. But anyway, just wanted to mention and clarify that you don't have to make the modification, because that is correct for the Kronos 1. But let me just show you real quick. I'm ready to join these two halves together. Let me move this out the way before I knock it on the floor or something. Let me just show you what I've done with these parts. For the bottom, I'm only installing what I have to seal up the secondary hull. And what I've done so far is, let me get my my cheat sheet here. Where is it? There we go. So what I've got here is, you've got to install, they call for you to install two wires that kind of run up to the front here. One goes on this bottom section here, and that's your D wire. And your D wire provides your lights. Let me plug this into the board so I can turn this on for you. Flip this around. Alright, let's turn that on. And you can see those lights turn on. Those are to provide your spotlights under the wing here, so you get your spotlights shining. They sit recessed a bit, so they're not, they're not a wide beam. It's a narrow beam lighting up the underside there. So that's going to look good. So I've got that wired up. This wire is so long between these two lights. It only has to go from here to here. I don't know why they made such a long wire. I just tacked it down. I ran it in a kind of a U here just to take out the slack, and then I just tacked it down at the corners here just to keep it in place. Other than that, you've got this light here, which this is your, let's see, which one is this? Is L. And this is your bottom light on the engineering hull, and it also runs through here and out to the neck where there's a light on there as well. I don't know if these are strobes or not. I haven't plugged them in to see. But either way, they're lights for the bottom that go on the bottom section. So I've got those set in place, and let me turn this off and unplug this. Another thing, if you want to test these lights, just don't plug them in all the way. Just slide them in enough to where they make contact into the board. If you plug them in all the way and then you try to undo them, they catch on these snaps in here. And the problem I had with the TOS board was, if you did that a couple times, it was such a pain in the butt to get these to let go that it actually worked some of these connectors loose. So just don't plug it in all the way to where it snaps in if you want to test these lights. So I've got that bottom part ready. And then we've got the top section here. And everything's going to get caught up on everything else because there's so many lights. So many wires running out here. So here's the top. And one thing I want to mention is they call for a wire labeled E. Is it E? Yeah, labeled E. And basically it comes up in here and it shines forward. Now the only thing I could figure those lights were for is for when this is the Katinga, it lights those forward windows on the engineering hull. Well, you don't have any windows up there on the Kronos 1, so you don't need these lights. So I'm not going to use them. I'm not going to plug them in. These are just going to be, there's no point in having them. All that's going to do is give a light source in here for you to have light leaks with. And if you don't need them, there's no point in having the light in there to create obvious light leaks if you have any. So I'm going to leave those off. And what I did though was I did run all my wires. You've got what do we got? 3 sets of wires on each side. You've got your green lights. Now they're going to light up the chiller grills. And then you've got a light for the front and the back, I believe. And again, I don't know if these are strobes or steady-ons. I haven't hooked them up yet. But I've got those run out on both sides. And I've got these secured. What I did with this was I just took a piece of sheet styrene. You can use other stuff, but anything. I just took a sheet and glued it on both ends. And just to tack these wires down and hold them in place so they're not rattling around inside the model. But by doing it that way versus tacking the actual wire down, it lets me slide these wires. So you can see, it lets me slide these wires so that when I get the nacelles on, I can pull the excess slack out of it instead of having issues of having too much wire hanging out here. So that's why I did that way. I just think it's a good way to tack the wires down and not have them flopping around. But at the same time, it still allows you to slide these wires around so that way you can take out any slack as you need to. So just a tip for you if you want to use it. But so I've got those all in place, and I think that's about it. I think this is about ready to close up. Now it does call for you to run all these wires through this back hole. I may do that. I don't know. I don't see any reason not to be able to run them through the center hole here. There's not really anything to block it. But I've got this ready to close up now, so that's what I'm going to do. The only other thing I'll mention is on this back part, they do call for you to bend your wires because it is such a tight spot. So you do need to bend these, and I'm going to bend them just like that. So I've got them bent to the side because it's such a, I guess, such a tight spot back here between this and then the back of, the back of this section here. They want you to bend those wires so you're not having any problems with it. So I've got those bent now. And this is pretty much ready to go together. So that's what I'm going to work on. I'm going to get this sealed up and take a look at whether or not I want to start sealing up the back as well, since I've got the impulse engines pretty much squared away. But let me work on that and we'll come back and take a look. All right, I've got the 2 halves sealed up and together. Let me turn my light on overhead. It's kind of dark. So you can see how that's looking. I haven't put any of the back panels on yet. I'm not going to do that yet. I'm going to make sure everything's good. Do a light test before I finalize everything and start working on those panels on the side, on the back here. Everything in the sides is done, but we've got all this paneling back here has got to be done. This isn't secured in place yet either. The impulse deck, I got to do that yet. So let's go ahead and do a light test. Make sure we got everything working. So we've got green. We've got our green lights on both sides working. We've got a steady on both sides working. Yep, I moved my camera, didn't I? All right, there you go. Better view of it. Now we've got a steady on both sides that's working. And we also have one flashing light on both sides that's working. I've got already shown, I've got the impulse and the rear firing torpedo or photon torpedo working. And we've got one flashing light on the bottom here. This one runs out to the neck. And both our spotlights are working. So everything that's plugged in is good to go. Everything's working. That's what you want. You want to make sure you test everything before you finalize closing everything up. Now I've glued the hull together, but I could still access wires without this back piece on. So That's one thing you want to do, is make sure that you test everything. And that's pretty much it, guys. That's pretty much it for this part here. It's all put together. I've got my my parts on the front here that I did, which looks really good. I added a couple little details right here, and I think that looks a lot better. I'm happier with that. And this back is turning out really nice with that impulse deck. Looks really good. And I think I'm ready to do another section now. I think I'm gonna move on and probably do the bridge, the bulb up front, and the neck, and get that worked out. So I should have the masks from Gary here shortly. Within, let's see, today's Tuesday. I should have them by Thursday, according to tracking. So when I get those in, I'll be at least ready to start this part. This is all together. It won't take me any time to add these panels in at the back here and get that ready. But I don't have to have those in place necessarily to do the painting on top and on the bottom. But anyway, guys, I think that's going to do it for this episode. I think I'm pushing 25, 30 minutes maybe, and I don't want to run it too long. And I think this is a good stopping point now that I've got this section all wired up, ready to go, and ready for painting. And I'll start working on the next video. I'll come back. I'll be working on the neck and the command module, the command bulb up front with the bridge and all, and we'll get that squared away. But thank you, everybody, for watching these videos. Appreciate everybody that's been subscribing lately. I've had a lot of new subscribers, mostly thankfully to Boyd over at TrekWorks for name dropping me, and I appreciate it. I'm glad that, or thankful, appreciate that Boyd saw fit to do that for me. He has some faith in me, I guess. And hopefully I won't disappoint him or any of the new subscribers that are joining in. But thank you again for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider hitting that subscribe button. And it costs you nothing to do it, but it helps me out tremendously, especially in terms of my my sponsors and seeing everything. And speaking of sponsors, as always, let me give a shout out to Cass over at Lake Monster Details for his continued support, Gus over at G-Cows for his continued support, and of course Gary over at Mask Design, whose masks we'll be using here hopefully in the next episode or two. We'll be using those. Just want to get these sub-assemblies done. But again, thank you, everybody. Till next time, keep modeling.